Welcome back. Now, the issue of race and how it may affect voting has been frequently mentioned in the run-up to the election, but racism itself has been notably absent from the American media agenda. This month, an Al Jazeera report on racism by supporters of John McCain and Sarah Palin made international headlines. Reporter Casey Kaufman travelled to Ohio to talk to people attending a rally by the Republican vice presidential candidate. The report has since been accused of being one-sided and anti-American, but as one US observer pointed out, the camera didn't lie.
A small town in the swing state of Ohio is where Sarah Palin addresses some of her core supporters. This area is mostly white and working class, and here's what some have to say about presidential candidate Barack Obama.
I'm afraid if he wins, the black will take over. It's not a Christian. This is a Christian nation. What is our country going to end up like?
When you've got a Negro running for president, you need a first stringer. He's definitely a second stringer.
He seems like a sheep or a wolf in sheep's clothing, to be honest with you. And I believe Palin, she's filled with the Holy Spirit, and I believe she's going to bring honesty and integrity to the White House.
He's related to a known terrorist, for one.
He is friends with a terrorist of this country.
He must support terrorists. You know, if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it must be a duck. And that, to me, is Obama.
Just the whole the Muslim thing and everything. I mean, everybody's still kind of, a lot of people have forgotten about 9/11, but I don't know. It's just kind of a little unnerving.
Obama and his wife, I'm concerned that they could be anti-white, that he might hide that.
I don't like the fact that he thinks us white people are trash, because we're not.
Hey! Taylor and his friends lined the road leading to the rally to show their support for Barack Obama.
Hey, women's rights! Their body, their story.
Baby killers. Call it what you want. It's baby killers.
Taylor is from St. Clairsville and is shocked by the names he's been called by his own neighbors.
I've been called the N-word. I've been kind of Muslim. I've been called a un-American. I'm worried with these people. The tension's getting thicker and thicker. When people are like that, it's starting to scare me.
Worried about what? Be specific.
Be specific. I'm afraid some of these people might try to hurt Obama.
The divisive nature of this campaign has brought out into the open what's usually discussed behind closed doors in America. It's a reminder that hate and fear are still powerful forces in American society. Casey Kaufman, Al Jazeera, in Eastern Ohio.
Well, let's rejoin our guests now in New York, Dr. Manning Marable. Also in New York, Glenn Ford, and in Washington, D.C., Ryan Grimm. Ryan Grimm in Washington, D.C., let me start with you for the second part of the programme. I mean, what do you make of those extraordinary comments in Casey Kaufman's report there? One person called Obama a terrorist. One said that if he becomes president, the blacks will take over America. I mean, how much do these comments reinforce racial fears and prejudices in the American psyche?
Well, these anecdotes have been popping up over the last year. This is, Al Jazeera, what they stumble on is something that's very real out there. And you raise an interesting question about why the mainstream media, the corporate media I'm a part of, hasn't covered this more. And perhaps they should have, but for better or for worse, the media takes its cues from the campaigns. And Barack Obama has very consciously tried to downplay all of these events. Going back to October, November, December of last year, there were a number of incidents that can, really only be called terrorist, like vandalism with racial epithets of campaign offices and other blatantly racist actions taken towards the Obama campaign. And Obama's staff and Obama himself would push reporters, let's talk about the issues. Let's talk about the war. Let's talk about the economy. Let's talk about what's addressing, the problems facing this country. And Obama didn't want to talk about race. I presume he didn't think that it rebounded to him in a politically beneficial way. But that tells you that America isn't necessarily comfortable in dealing with race.
All right, let's bring in back Manning Marable there in New York. I mean, based on those comments that you heard coming from those supporters in Casey Kaufman's report, I mean, what sort of assessment can you make about the use of race as an issue in this election campaign?
Race is absolutely central in the campaign. What Barack Obama's people are trying to do is to run a campaign where a race becomes neutral. They don't want to focus on it. The one time that they did was a brilliant intervention. His speech toward a more perfect union in March of this year, where he responded to the Jeremiah Wright debate. But how race is actually being used by the McCain people is in a very subtle way. For example, Barack Obama gave a talk on a radio program back in 2001 where he makes a reference to the tragedy of the civil rights movement of the 1960s was that it did not substantively transform the economic status of black people in the United States, and there needed to be more redistributive economics. Well, McCain's people have described that as calling for welfare, which is a euphemism for race, or calling Obama a socialist or a Marxist, even though they know that he's a progressive liberal. So this is how race is being manipulated inside of the campaign.
Let's just put that issue to Glenn Ford there in New York. I mean, how would you define the role of the media in raising the race issue in this campaign? Has it been a help or a hindrance?
Well, first of all, the scenes that you just showed are viewed with repugnance and disgust by many, many, many white Americans who don't want to see themselves like that. Again, there is a consensus in the corporate media to dismiss the Bradley effect. In fact, I think one of the best examples appeared on Sunday, a column by the liberal columnist for the New York Times, Frank Rich, which was entitled "In Defense of White Americans." And it totally dismissed the Bradley effect as an impossibility because he declared the country had changed. This before the election has even occurred. But putting aside the Bradley effect, the corporate media has paid very, very little attention to that which frightens African Americans most of all, and that is the prospect of yet another stolen election. And the process of stealing the election is to suppress black and Latino voters.
All right.
We have studies that show, authoritative stories that show that 1/4 to 1/8 of the new voters, most of them Democrats, in swing states like Colorado and Ohio, may be the targets of flagging, of voter suppression, not be allowed to vote on November 4th. That's a very, very serious issue.
All right, let's just bring in back. Let's just bring in back Ryan Grimm.
Directly involves race.
Okay, let's just bring in back Ryan Grimm there in Washington D.C. I mean, there are fears that race could still derail Barack Obama on election day. That's the point I think that Glenn Ford was making. Do you think that'll happen?
Well, if I had to gamble, I would say no. I don't think it's going to happen. But I know that there are a lot of Obama supporters who really won't believe that he's been elected until either the end of election day or actually until he's inaugurated on January 20th, because this is the United States of America we're talking about. It's elected 43 straight white males over the last 200 plus years, and a lot of people are wondering can America do it? We're at the precipice now. Will we take the final step and get it done? And it looks like it's going to happen, but people still have to go in there and do it.
All right, let's get a final thought from Manning Marable there in New York. I mean, how do you think the issue of race will play actually on election day? Is America ready for a black president? Briefly, if you could.
There is a Bradley effect, which means that a section of whites who say they are going to vote for Obama, when they go into the voting booth, they won't have the courage to do it. But I do believe Obama will win. And I also believe, on a final note, that the ethnic and racial demographics of the United States are fundamentally changing. By 2042, the majority of the United States population will consist of blacks, Hispanics, and Asians, and people of Middle East descent. And so Obama was inevitable. And what we will see in the coming decades are more people of color and women assuming the chief executive position of the United States.
Okay.
So if we think about this demographically, Obama was inevitable within the context of U.S. democracy, as deeply racist as it is.
Okay, gentlemen, we have to leave it there. Manning Marable in New York, Glenn Ford also in New York, and Ryan Grimm there in Washington, D.C. Thank you very much indeed for your time. And thank you so much for joining us here on this edition of Inside Story. We, of course, welcome your comments and your suggestions. Please email them to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. From the whole team here, goodbye for now.